The light greatswords are a new class of weapon added in Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. They blend the sweeping strikes you might find familiar from a regular greatsword with the precise stabs of a thrusting sword, though they aren't fully shield compatible, so don't get any ideas about cowering behind those great shields. Now, there are currently 3 weapons within the class: Milady, Rellana's twin blades, and Leda's sword. This video is going to go over all 3 weapons, a bit of info on their scaling based on my own personal experiences, and of course, how to find all of them. But I will warn you, while Milady is relatively easy to get, and you can obtain her almost immediately after entering the Realm of Shadow, the others are going to take more work, and even involve defeating some fairly difficult bosses and significantly progressing the storyline for the DLC, so you might not be able to get all of these in one sitting. With that in mind, there's timestamps for each section where you can come back later if you want to check it out in the future. Also, these weapons scale off of a wide variety of stats, Dex, Strength, Int, and Faith to be exact. So not every light greatsword is going to be compatible with every build, because 2 of them are somber and 1 of them is regular. But that said, they're an extremely fun class of weapons. Even some of the ones that don't work for my build, I'm like, I want to keep using this because the moveset's really fun. So let's start by getting into the basic light greatsword moveset. Your light attack is a really long flowing combo that lasts for up to 6 hits. It mixes both thrusts and slashes, but is primarily slashing. And there's also a little bit of movement that helps the attacks flow one into another into another. On the other hand, the heavy attack multi-hits, so it's kind of a double slash. The jump attack is also a double slash, and the running attacks work very similarly to the regular light and heavy, where the light attacks flow very freely, and the heavy attacks tend to multi-hit. For me personally, the moveset kind of felt like a straight sword on steroids, much like how the great katanas felt like a katana on steroids. Which, by the way, if you want to know more about how to find the great katanas and their movesets, I have a video on that which you can watch after this. Now, in terms of the light greatsword's moveset, one thing that I have to say stands out is just how well movement incorporates into them. Much like with the backhand blades, again, video after this if you want to find those, another really excellent class of weapons, there's a little bit of movement on a lot of your attacks which makes it feel really good. Very rarely will you swing and go, oh damn it, the enemy was just out of range. Instead, your character just smoothly steps in and you strike the enemy. Now, with a lot of the weapons that I covered previously, I didn't think guard counters were super relevant. With that said, when it comes to light greatswords, I think it's very relevant, because number 1, guard counters hit like a truck. It's basically a heavy attack, except it's a heavy attack you get to execute for free because you blocked a hit. Number 2, there's deflecting hard tier. And number 3, the heavy attack guard counter on the light greatswords double hits, which is insanely powerful. It is very effective at poise breaking enemies, and honestly could be the best part of this weapon's moveset. So, if you're going to use a light greatsword, I highly recommend pairing it with a shield and using the guard counter, or alternatively, getting good and playing around the deflecting hard tier. Unfortunately, because 2 of the 3 light greatswords are somber weapons, you can't modify their Ash of War, so if you want to do a bunch of elemental infusions, change damage types, and customize, you're going to have to stick to Milady. Which honestly is fine, because the worst thing about Milady is that she starts with Impaling Thrust. Not a terrible Ash of War, but thoroughly mediocre compared to something like Wing Stance. That said, I'll get into that a little bit more after I talk about where to find it. And if any of these weapons interest you, maybe you want to see what a full build looks like, well, do be sure to get subscribed and leave a like while you're down there, because I'm probably going to be talking about that in a future video. Especially because, well, so if you want to see more, share it with your friends. So first up, where do you find Milady? As soon as you enter Shadow of the Erdtree, you can pretty much obtain it, because you find it in the western tower of Castle Ensis. And as far as I remember, there's no actual hard barrier to entry. Now, there are a bunch of Mesmer soldiers, and they can be a little bit challenging. Now, technically, if you run fast enough, you don't really need to defeat any of them, but because some of them are located in very narrow spaces and wield weapons like spears that can easily deal damage from a distance, you're probably going to want to kill a few of them. So, start from the castle front gate side of Grace. Head across the bridge and into the castle proper. Then, go up the stairs to your left until you find the western tower. You'll know this is the right one when you see a Mesmer soldier wielding a spear, and followed by a dog guarding those stairs. Again, you can run past them, but especially because the soldier has a spear, it's really dangerous to do so. You are better off luring him safely down to the bottom of the stairs, killing him, and then moving on to the top. At the top of this staircase is a battlement, and to your right you'll notice a ladder leading up to a tower. This is your goal. Climb all the way up the ladder, and at the top of the tower there's a treasure chest which contains Milady. Again, this is why you want to defeat the enemies, so they're not hot on your tail and you have plenty of time to loot the chest and then get out of there. But like I said, Milady is a little bit mediocre without wing stance. So to make your Milady shine, you need the light Greatsword exclusive Ash of War. And this is found by further exploring Castle Ensis. Keep going until you reach the waypoint for the boss located at the Castle Lord's Chamber site of Grace. Again, you technically don't really need to defeat enemies here, but being able to do so helps a lot. At the Castle Lord's Chamber site of Grace, turn around and exit the room onto the balcony, then jump down the cliff face to the right. Do be careful to not accidentally jump off a cliff. There are often bloodstains from people who weren't quite that cautious. When you get to the bottom, enter the tower, and then climb all the way back up to the top, up the stairs, and up both ladders. Congratulations, you've done it. You find wing stance in the chest at the top of the tower, head back to a site of Grace, and immediately equip it to your Milady. Now to activate wing stance, hold down your L2. After that, you either press R1 or R2. This all assumes you're on controller and the weapon's held in your character's right hand. R1 is a whirling slash that hits 3 times. Meanwhile, R2 is a leaping attack that impales an enemy, slamming them into the ground. The R1 is very good at proccing statuses as it hits rapidly, whereas the R2 with wing stance is very good at poise breaking, surprisingly so for such a light weapon, as light greatswords, while they're not too small, aren't too heavy either. They're definitely no colossal weapon, sitting more in a medium weight class. Like always, this continues the weapon's theme of remaining highly mobile while dishing out solid damage. Now, in terms of general scaling, Milady is a standard / pierce weapon, with pretty good base fizz at plus 25. It requires 12 strength, 17 dex, meaning the damage scales more heavily off dex than it does strength, resulting in D rank strength scaling and C rank dex scaling. But this is a regular weapon, so it can be infused to change the element, or, like I just talked about with wing stance, swapping to the Ash of War. Now, infusions open this weapon up to be useful for both intelligence and faith builds, or alternatively, they can be used to take advantage of enemy weaknesses. You know that enemy's weak to fire? Well, convert it over and make it a fire or flame art weapon. So overall, Milady is going to be the most versatile of the light greatswords, and it's already a strong showing for what is overall a very good weapon class. Now, the second light greatsword is Rellana's Twin Blades, a remembrance weapon obtained by defeating Rellana Twin Moon Knight in Castle Ensis. And this dexterity, strength, faith, and intelligence weapon is better thought of as 2 separate weapons, one of which is dex int strength, the other of which is dex faith strength. This is because the Ash of War Moon and Fire stance uses separate scaling for the magic stance, which is on R1, and the fire stance, which is on R2, making the weapon very tricky to min-max. So first up, where do you find this amazing weapon? Well, you have to beat Rellana Twin Moon Knight. If you already progressed far enough into Castle Ensis for the Lord's Chamber, necessary to get the wing stance in the previous part of a video, then you should already be right outside of Rellana. But finding her isn't really the difficult part here. Beating her is. And so how do you go about that? Well, she's very aggressive and combos a lot of attacks together. One thing that I found to be particularly devastating is when I tried to roll directly away from her, she would very often follow her slashes with a thrust, and that thrust is going to hit me directly in the face if I roll backwards. So instead, I learned to roll to the side, and in some cases, even roll towards the boss. Also, having a Spirit Ash or another player as a friendly summon definitely helps. You can even summon Needle Knight Leda if you've progressed her quest line enough. That way you have a distraction on the field of battle, and the boss isn't focused directly on you. But that said, there's a couple of her moves which are particularly deadly. The first of which is when she summons a gigantic greatsword made out of magic. When she uses this, first she will slash directly forwards. This is best avoided by dodging left or right. However, she follows this up with a sweeping slash that cuts across the field of battle. You're probably not going to outrange this one, as the reach of this weapon is absolutely massive. So again, you have to dodge with the right time, and spoiler alert, it's often a little slower than you would expect, so if you dodge too early, you'll stand up and then take Greatsword to the face. It hits for an absolute truckload and will probably straight up one-shot you, if not two-shot you. So in short, time your dodges to avoid that. The deadliest attack for Fire Stance is where she summons a bunch of fire tornadoes. The way to avoid this is when you see her start to channel fire, run away, that way you avoid the damage. And last up, the attack that I know caught a lot of people by surprise is her Twin Moon summon. She'll summon 2 moons, which drop to Earth, one after the other, then she'll slam into the ground, creating a third impact. Luckily, this one is surprisingly easy to avoid. Simply jump to negate all damage from the attack. Now, with all of these tips in mind, that doesn't necessarily make the fight easy, but it should at the very least make it manageable. Personally, I found Bleed to be quite effective. I attacked her with both Bloody Backhand Blades and also an Eleanor's Pole Blade. Both of those builds worked for me. Now, if you are playing a status build, absolutely do not summon Leda, because the Ash of War for Leda's weapon cleanses buffs and debuffs from the enemy, which of course is handy for wiping out helpful buffs, and is terrible if you're playing a status build. Now, in terms of a moveset, if you're just wielding one blade, it's the same as Milady. However, this is a twin weapon, and your moveset changes when wielding both blades. Your light attack becomes a mix of cross slashes and double stabs for a 5-hit combo, whereas the heavy attack remains largely the same. Then the jump attack becomes a single thrust with the blade held in your right hand. So, how do you scale Rellana's twin blades? Oh boy, do I have a novel for you, because it is incredibly confusing and difficult to scale. First of all, this is a somber weapon. It can't be infused to use a different Ash of War. The one it comes with is Moon and Fire stance. So you hold L2 to enter the stance, then press R1 to unleash a barrage of magic crescents, or R2 to turn your location into a fiery tornado. Now your physical damage scales the best with dexterity and strength, but this is a physical magic fire weapon. And the magic and fire is where things get confusing, because the Moon stance and the Ash of War primarily scales with intelligence, but the Fire stance primarily scales with faith. Therefore, to min-max this weapon while actively using both stances, you need incredibly high faith and intelligence. Alternatively, you could hold it as either your left hand or right hand weapon and only use one sword, treating it as a faith dex strength or int dex strength weapon respectively. By using half, it's much easier to play the weapon if you're not a New Game Plus or you're on the lower side of the level bracket. Overall, this weapon is very cool and super thematic, but it hasn't felt too practical to me personally. That said, if you found more practical uses for it, then do let me know down in the comments below, because I'm curious what success other people have had. Now, the last light Greatsword is quite possibly the most powerful, and that is Leda's Needle. It has the same excellent moveset as the rest, along with a unique Ash of War Needle Piercer. This dexterity strength faith weapon is found after defeating Needle Knight Leda in Enir Island. To access this weapon, you need to progress the main story by defeating both Mesmer and Romina Saint of a Bud. So yes, it's an endgame weapon with endgame stats to match. In short, once you're able to enter Enir Island, get to the Spiral Rise Site of Grace. From there, continue up the spiral using rooftops and staircases until you reach the Cleansing Chamber Anteroom Site of Grace. When you do, you'll see a large open chamber with a figure in the distance. Trigger a cutscene, speak to Leda, then touch the red invasion sign to engage with Needle Knight Leda and her allies. This is where things get dicey. You must fight against Needle Knight Leda and Dryleaf Dane, but several other NPCs can appear either as enemies or allies depending on which questlines you completed. So, to make this easier, touch the golden summoning signs before the battle to summon friendly NPCs. Also, during the battle, try to eliminate Dryleaf Dane as soon as he appears, because his mobility makes him absolutely lethal. Also, using a Spirit Ash summon like Black Knife Tish or Mimic Tear to distract your enemies will allow you to focus on a single combatant. Alternatively, if you have a powerful new Spirit Ash from the DLC, toss them out instead, because they're pretty darn good. One last trick, when your opponent tries to drink, this is a great time to punish them or take a drink yourself and heal up. The combat is very frantic. Personally, I don't think either Dryleaf Dane or Needle Knight Leda are all that bad in a 1v1 situation, so as long as your Spirit Ash can distract the other, it shouldn't be too rough on you. However, if they get to team up for just a minute, maybe the aggro doesn't work out, it is absolutely brutal. You won't find yourself with a moment to breathe, and one single mistake leads to you getting comboed to death. So to be clear, the fight is far from easy. But it's absolutely worth it, A, because it's needed to complete the DLC, and B, because you get a bunch of awesome weapons. Now, Leda's Needle is perfect for a Dex Faith build, as you have 247 physical and 149 holy damage at plus 10, which is already pretty darn significant given how light the weapon is. Investing into Faith also scales the Ash of War, allowing you to deal more damage either up close or from a safe distance. Ultimately, the weapon ends up with B rank dexterity scaling, but you definitely want a good chunk of Faith to enhance the Ash of War. Because this is a somber weapon, it can't be infused and it can't use a different Ash of War. But trust me, you wouldn't want to use something different from Needle Piercer. Press L2 to summon golden blades around your target, which then impale it from all sides. Damage-wise, the Ash of War is quite focused, making it an excellent choice for single target damage against Holy Weak enemies. It does hit quite hard, even if you don't have the best Faith stat. But it also removes buffs and debuffs from the target it damages, which is incredible and makes this one of the strongest weapons in the DLC for some builds. So first of all, if you're using it as your main weapon, stripping buffs completely trivializes certain enemies. If you're buff focused, that's where we get a lot of damage, and without that, they just kind of fall over or hit like a wet noodle. And stripping debuffs, while it sounds bad at first, and it can be bad if used incorrectly, if you've ever summoned someone using Leda's Needle, your status build, you're wondering why does my damage just stop? Yeah, that's why the debuffs are getting stripped. But if done correctly, removing debuffs allows you to quickly reproc statuses and maximize your damage, which is where Leda's Needle can come in as a swap weapon, or as a weapon that you use while power stancing something else that's better at inflicting statuses. So once you get used to using Leda's sword, it's an incredibly powerful weapon, but it's not going to be for everyone. And do be careful when using it in cooperative play if your ally is a status build. Coordinate with them to maximize their damage, rather than just cutting it away halfway through. Now personally, right now I don't have a stats for this weapon, which is probably why you've been seeing a lot of lackluster damage numbers. But I am pretty darn close to being able to go into New Game Plus, and honestly, I'm considering a Dex Faith playthrough, and if so, this is very much going to be one of my staples. And if you've been using it and having success, I'm curious, is it as lethal in PvP as it sounds? Because stripping all of a player's buffs sounds totally insane, but I've only tried it in PvE so far. And so with that said, those are the 3 light greatswords which were added with Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, a little bit about their moveset, some info on their scaling, where to find each of them, and of course, a few of my experiences using the weapons. Unlike the backhand blades and great katanas, these are not my daily drivers. I haven't used them that much, but from what little I have experienced, so far it's been pretty darn tantalizing. So this is very much a class of weapon that I look forward to using more in the future. And again, if you've been using any of these weapons frequently, then please do let me know your experiences down in the comments below. With that said, if you're looking for something else to watch, maybe check out my video on the backhand blades, where to find them, how to use them, or my video on the great katanas, where to find them and how to use them. Bloody backhand blades and Rakshas's great katana are 2 of my favorite weapons from the DLC, and honestly 2 of my favorite weapons from the entire game. So I'll link to those videos up in the card and down below. Or if you want to know more on how to find the light greatswords, then check out my article over on Maxroll. It has all the information I covered in this video, along with a few drier things that didn't feel like they fit too well into a video format. And of course, before I go, a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for continued support. For as little as $1 a month, you can help make videos just like this one possible. Link to support is also down below. And a big thanks to everyone who watched to the end. Glad you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something either on how to use some of these weapons or where to find them. In terms of where to find them, these are honestly pretty easy from my experience, though I have to say, Wing Stance, very easy to miss. I missed it for way too long. I was like, man, I wish I had a better Ash of War for Milady. Wing Stance is the perfect Ash of War to solve that problem. And also, I have to say, the outcome of this video was not what I expected, because before I tested anything, I was like, Rellana's probably super awesome OP, Leda's mediocre. Nope, literally the exact opposite. Leda's OP, Rellana's kind of mediocre, though, like I said before, I'm sure there are builds that make it work. But man, that just looks so cool. How can something not be OP when it looks as cool as Rellana's? But with that, I'm going to continue exploring all the different weapons in Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. And so thanks again for watching to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.